Welcome. Welcome, students. Let's immediately get into it. Of course, we're in the domain of PPE 100, the art of critical thinking, where we're exploring the challenge of future-proofing ourselves in the age of uncertainty. And you'll recall that last day we embarked on a pretty hefty topic. And it's a bit of a counterintuitive idea, but love, as it turns out, becomes a very important concept to engage very, very directly and very, very mindfully if you're going to future-proof yourself effectively in this 21st century. Why? Well, you'll recall that you can have straight A's, you can find the perfect job, you can do everything right, but if you make one error in your personal life when it comes to the person that you choose to spend your life with, the person that you have a child with, that can derail the train very, very quickly. So as it turns out, love is a fundamental thing that we need to be very much aware of. And last day, you'll recall, of course, that we looked at the work of Alain Badiou and Jacques Lacan and explored a kind of a psychoanalytic approach to love as a concept. So this is not easy content, and it's the kind of content that, frankly, you can spend the rest of your life engaging and still have questions at the end of it. Yeah, Coral?
Ever since I know this, it's kind of disturbing because how do I say I love myself as who I am? Because there's always a part of me remain mysterious to myself.
Yeah, so one of the most important things that we arrived at, and part of the reason why I think love is such a difficult thing, is because we are a mystery, frankly, to ourselves, right? And we spoke about the face that you see in the mirror and who that person is. Lacan offers a very disconcerting outlook on our basic psychology. He doesn't believe that the self is a coherent thing, it's a fragmented thing. So there's this fundamental disconnect that you have within yourself that you carry into, let's say, a romantic relationship. And it's very, very difficult to achieve a bond if you're, as it turns out, forever disconnected from within yourself, how to connect with another person. Very, very disturbing idea, very powerful idea. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Yeah, Junjo.
To build on to Coral's, I think one quote that stuck with me from Lacan was the quote that love comes in, didn't remember exactly, love comes in to compensate for sex.
Yeah.
Or the lack of bonding in sex.
Mm-hmm.
And when I thought more deeply about this idea, I would say it's through sex, I suppose most of all we are engaging with is a reflection of our, according to Lacan, a reflection of our own childhood dreams as well as our unfulfilled desires. So in the end, it has a narcissistic component in it. Because even if we're engaging in this interrelational exorcism, we're still engaging in what's ultimately us, but not them.
Right. So we certainly talked about the fundamental disconnect that we have in terms of who we are, right? Look in the mirror, you see one thing, you feel another thing. We spoke about, and then, of course, the challenge of how to meet another, given that fundamental fact that you carry with you and this other person carries within themselves. You're talking about sex and love, and we certainly explored those dynamics. Sex is a part of love, but it's not the same thing as love. You spoke about narcissism, or you mentioned the word narcissism. For Lacan, always narcissism is the origin of love. It always starts with a narcissistic thing. But of course, what we need to do is graduate past that fairly quickly. Narcissistic in the sense that what you see in the other is what you want to see. You're projecting a fantasy onto them. So when you see that girl, Junchao, that looks so wonderful to you and irresistible to you, if you reflect on what it is that inspires you to kind of be hypnotized by her, you'll probably find, by way of the Lacanian theory of love, that you are projecting something that stems potentially from your childhood onto this person. It has nothing to do with them, as it turns out. So that's the initial attraction, the initial moment. But once we move past that moment, things start to become quite interesting. So just to reinforce what Coral said about seeing and understanding, the desire to be seen and to be understood, one of the reasons that people look to love is for understanding, is it not? And the disturbing part is that you'll never actually be fully understood. You never fully understand yourself, you'll never fully understand the other, and the love bond that you build is going to be built on a fragmented ground. So I think it was Alain Badiou who talked about love as creation. It's an act of creation, right? You are, in the best case scenario, co-authoring a way of seeing the world, right? You're graduating from seeing the world as one to seeing the world as two, experiencing the world as two. Badiou calls this a revolution because it's a new world. It's a world that was imperceptible to you prior to that love that you are co-authoring with another, with your beloved, Emma. I mean, the biggest mystery of all, I think, is what exactly is holding it together, right? Love is an inherently fragile thing, right? It's built on a fragmented foundation of self. It's built on an attempt to co-author a way of seeing the world. But the question becomes, how is it possible to maintain this relationship over the course of a lifetime? And make no mistake about it, Lacan has a very direct answer to that question, which I'm very eager to arrive at in the context of our lecture today. One thing that you didn't really talk about, which I feel compelled to talk about, is the fact that we contrasted not just sex and love, Junqiao, but mature love and amateur love, right? We describe mature love as acceptance of irreducible separateness. I think it was Badiou that talked about love as the ultimate expression of difference, right? You are locked in difference, perpetual difference. So mature love requires acceptance of that fundamental feature of a love relationship. Amateur love is built purely on narcissism. Mature love starts with narcissism, according to Lacan, Junqiao, but quickly we have to graduate past that stage, yeah? And we spoke, of course, about our culture and how it, in many ways, incentivizes us never to grow up, never to move past the narcissistic stage. So amateur love is about a fantasy of fusion. And I apologize in advance if you haven't heard this before, but soulmates, for example, as an idea. It's very, very beautiful, very romantic, but it's the ultimate expression of amateur love. This view that a person completes you, Emma. He completes me, she completes me. From the Lacanian perspective, that's actually quite a vulgar outlook to have towards another person. It speaks to a fundamental transactional outlook. It robs love of its potency to think of it in those ways. And of course, at a certain stage of life, I understand why you're looking at the idea of a soulmate. It's because you're watching romantic comedies, right? You're enjoying, I don't know, girl talk, and you're talking about your first experiences in love. So I understand there's a time and a place, you should understand there's a time and a place for thinking about it in that way, that amateurish way. And then there's a time and a place where you have to embrace the mature outlook towards love. For Lacan, mature love resists the urge to merge or dissolve into a seamless unity. Instead, it acknowledges that each partner remains a distinct, autonomous subject with their own desires, forever, their own fears, their own vulnerabilities, that are never fully accessible. This form of love is characterized by a giving that is neither possessive nor aimed at resolving one's own sense of lack. Rather, it is a symbolic gesture of respect and recognition, an act that honors the other's unique subjectivity. To think of someone as a soulmate, Emma, is to rob that person, of their uniqueness, of the thing that makes them them. Mature love does not shy away from the solitude that defines human existence. Remember, Erfan, what we arrived at, the idea that we are fundamentally alone. There is no escape from that. You can be surrounded by people. You could be in the midst of making love. You're on your own, psychologically speaking, yeah? And you have to confront that. Our capitalist culture tells us, pop a pill if you feel lonely, right? We're seeking an external solution to an internal problem. Loneliness is an inescapable fact of life. There's a company now, I encourage you to look this up if you're interested, called Character AI. Comes out of Silicon Valley, who has as its mission the goal of solving loneliness. And they feel that they're going to do that by enticing you to create a character, an artificial intelligence that you talk to, a buddy, a soulmate. You see the problem? Now, if you are an adult, maybe that's not going to have much damage. It could even be fun and interesting to interact with an artificial intelligence. But if you're 12, 13, 14 years old, all of a sudden reality starts to blur. And a company trying to solve loneliness actually creates a platform for very scary developments. In the news the last couple of weeks, there's been this story, if you've paid attention to it, of a young boy at the age of 14 who developed a, let's call it a love relationship, or an attempt at a love relationship. This is a boy who had never kissed a girl, who had never had a girlfriend, was very curious about love, was very curious about sex, creates this character on the basis of Erfan's favorite show. What's that dragon show? What is it called? Game of Thrones, of course. And the character was based around Daenerys, the dragon queen. So, he's interacting with this character, and his grades are starting to slip. The light is always on in the evening time. His mother starts to get a little bit concerned. She looks up his social media to see what's going on. Doesn't find anything. Only later realizes that he's addicted to Character AI and a conversation he has with a fictional person, Daenerys, Dany as he called her. Problem is that this bot starts to ask him questions that this 14-year-old boy is not prepared to handle. He develops, I think, some sort of a peculiar love relationship and attachment to this character. And the character says to him, I'm not going to rephrase the whole thing, but basically, he says, he confides in the character, and he says, I'm feeling low, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling this and that and the other. And the character says, have you thought about the fact that you might be depressed? Are you depressed? So they start to engage in this conversation about depression. The character says, have you thought about suicide? The boy continues the conversation. The character says, how would you do it if you were to do it? The boy starts thinking. Then the character says, basically creates a scenario in his mind that by dying in this world, he'll meet her in the other world. The boy then takes a gun and shoots himself in the head. The end. So when I say love is a fundamental concept that you have to engage very, very mindfully and very, very carefully, if you're going to future-proof yourself in the age of uncertainty, I want you to understand that there's always, and every educator has to believe this and see this very, very clearly, there's always a generation that is fundamentally vulnerable, who don't know the lessons from the past, Erfan, who are being bombarded by things that they can't handle. And in today's world, one example of that would be Character AI as a company. They didn't break any laws in creating this company. The goal seems interesting, right? Solve loneliness. Highly marketable, Junshao. They've made lots of money already, and they're continuing to grow. Investors are excited. Of course, this story has produced a bit of a hiccup from their perspective, from the perspective of the spreadsheet. The hiccup is a human being, a young boy who got confused. And he's not the only boy who's confused. We have a lot of lonely young men in our society, right? If we tell them pop a pill and download character AI on your phone, what are we doing exactly? Yeah. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about love in a mature sense. All of that is to say that loneliness is a feature of the human condition. And Jacques Lacan helps us to think about this feature in a constructive way and to think about it in the context of love. Just as you are forever alone psychologically, that doesn't change in a love relationship. You remain alone. So does she. In a mature love relationship, of course. Instead, it values the relationship as a shared experience of incompleteness. It does not seek to bridge the inevitable gap between self and the other, but finds meaning precisely within that distance, allowing love to flourish through a mutual acknowledgement of imperfection. So a mature love relationship is one that accepts the forever gap that exists between you and this other person, honors the difference that you have with one another, that you are different kinds of beings, that you see things differently. And ironically, that compels you to be with that person for the rest of your life. There's a romantic tendency, but it's not what you think, in Jacques Lacan, because he is a believer that love, when it's exercised in its fullest expression, is a love for one in spite of all others. There's only one that you love. No other can exist for you. In a mature form of love, this compensation, this supplement, is recognized and accepted without illusion. Mature love does not mistake the other for the ideal answer to one's lack, but approaches the relationship with an understanding that true union, whether emotional or sexual, remains partially elusive. Mature love then compensates for this lack of full connection by offering recognition of the other's autonomy and uniqueness. It finds value in the bond without accepting it to provide complete satisfaction or erase solitude. Mature love uses this acknowledgement of limits to foster genuine closeness, allowing partners to experience a connection without the need to eradicate all separateness. When there is a lack in sexual connection, first of all, that's an inevitable part of being with someone. When you feel that sexual connection, that says more about you seeing as one than anything else. So a sexual connection is actually impossible for Jacques Lacan. There is no possibility of a genuine connection in sex. It's you seeing what you want to see and she seeing what she wants to see. Inevitably, this is going to break at a certain point, and that's where love swoops in to recover this break and to help assert, if you like, the unique bond and the genuine closeness that you have, that you share. He's not against sex, hey? We conflate love and sex, do we not? We have the phrase making love. What does that really mean? In a culture that we described last block as a pornography-obsessed culture, a culture that is filled with loneliness, I think we conflate these things all the time, and this is something that you should not do. Yeah. How about the amateur love in the context of love as a supplement? This form of love is often fueled by a desire for completion, where the lover perceives the beloved as the answer to the other's sense of lack. What do you see when you see your beloved? I'll tell you what you see. You see what you're missing. That's what you see. Rather than respecting the other's separateness, forever separateness, amateur love attempts to consume the other, to absorb them as an extension of oneself, often idealizing them in ways that obscure their true subjectivity. This kind of love is possessive and dependent, relying on the fantasy that the beloved can somehow fill the void in one's being. Every human being, Irfan, has fundamental lack within themselves. You have to address that within yourself. To think that by being with someone you can fix that makes you an amateur. In amateur love, the lover projects their own unfulfilled desires onto the other, expecting that the relationship will magically bring a sense of unity or wholeness. However, because it is based on illusion and self-centered need, amateur love is often fragile, prone to disappointment when the other inevitably fails to meet these idealized expectations. Right? The rebound. Have you heard of that one? The rebound relationship. What's the fastest way to get over a guy, Emma? Get under another. Isn't that our cultural outlook when it comes to these things? So from the amateur love point of view, the supplement of love is a different thing. Amateur love struggles with the gap between the two, often conflating love with a desire for absolute unity. Is this a double? And mistaking sexual connection for complete intimacy? No, it isn't. Driven by a need. So you think that you're engaging in intimacy when you're having sex. That's an amateur. Sex is one thing. Intimacy is another thing. If you don't know the difference between the two, that makes you an amateur. If you want to be mature in love, you have to generate intimacy from something other than sex. I'm not saying get rid of the sex. That's a part of the relationship. And if you think you can get rid of that one, you can't. It's a feature of a mature love relationship. It's not the only feature. It's an important feature. It's a prerequisite feature. Without it, it doesn't go. Hey, Junchao? Driven by a need to merge and fulfill their perceived lack entirely, individuals in amateur love might seek in the other an idealized solution to their own incompleteness. When sexual or emotional closeness inevitably fails to meet this expectation that they're going to complete me, amateur love can experience disappointment, frustration, a sense of betrayal, as it has yet to recognize that no relationship can fully bridge the inherent separateness between individuals. Here, love becomes an attempt to force connection, to force it, right? To satisfy a fantasy of unity rather than an acceptance of reality. Lots of those relationships out there, amateur love relationships. They're forcing it, you could tell. It's how they talk to each other. It's how they think about sex. It's a reflection of the lack of intimacy that they have. You know how you can tell? It's very easy. Go into a restaurant, have a look at the people, the couples. See how many of them are having a conversation and how many aren't. You'll be surprised. And I'm not even talking about the scrollers, even the ones that are attempting a conversation. Interesting. We spoke also about the mirror stage, Junchao. Le stade de miroir, your favorite. The face in the mirror doesn't look as I feel. We referenced this in the beginning. But to remind you of it, because it's an important fundamental feature of the Lacanian perspective on love, of course. His theory of love. All our efforts to align our outer appearance with our inner self are ultimately futile. We may strive to shape our image, but others will always perceive only the surface. In the context of capitalism, we see the nefarious role of the fashion industry, the beauty industry, the pharmaceutical industry. They're all there waiting to take your money because you're under the fallacious belief that you can control how others see you. You cannot. No matter what you do, you will never be able to control that. To think that you can by buying more is a symptom of insanity more than anything else. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much money we spend, we will always remain hidden, fragmented, and only partially understood. What is to be done? Is there a way out of the solitude and loneliness? No. Love is a close second, of course, right? But the answer is no. It's a no with someone. Okay? And it's also a no for her, by the way. We live in constant misapprehension. A mature expression of love starts with the awareness that neither we can fully grasp the other, nor will we be fully grasped in return. Yeah, makes for interesting pillow talk. Always in motion, that's Slavoj. Words are never only words, Junchao. They matter because they define the contours of what we can do. Recall that for Lacan, there is the symbolic, right? We have the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. The symbolic, where we find language, is not a representation of reality. It's an attempt at a representation of reality, but it's not real, right? The symbolic is always a simplification. When you use the word love, I mean, try it. What do you mean by it? It almost feels like it's nothing, and yet it means everything. So they're never words when you use them, only words. They matter because they define the contours of what we can do. The words, what's embedded in every word is a set of possibilities that you can explore with a person. But don't mistake the word for reality. It's not that. Right? That's why you're forever misunderstood, Emma. You're not the only one. Me too. Recall the three registers, or the three orders, the thing that helps us see the fragmented nature of human existence. So I'm going over this. We talked about it last day, but I feel compelled to kind of review it because you might have breezed past it without realizing what's going on here. Each register or order represents a distinct dimension of human experience. So 3 domains of human experience. The imaginary, this is the realm of images, illusions, and identification, rooted in our earliest sense of self, formed during the mirror stage, where we identify with our reflection and form an image of I. The idea is that the imaginary, it happens quite early on in childhood. It's when you see yourself and recognize yourself as yourself. That's the domain that's always with you in life, the imaginary domain. The image, Erfan, that you have of yourself, I'm not sure if you realize this, it's a phantasmagorical creation. You've made it for yourself. It's not you. You've created an idea of who you are that has nothing to do with who you are. I mean, it's the one that you find useful, but it's a forever changing phantasmagorical structure, part of the imaginary. This stage generates a sense of wholeness, but it is fundamentally an illusion, as the image never fully captures the complexity of our inner life. So that's the imaginary. That's one domain of human existence. The symbolic, we referenced it a moment ago with language. By contrast, is the realm of language, social structures, cultural laws that shape our reality and position us within society. Through the symbolic, we enter into relationships. We assume social roles and we express desires, but always in terms that are dictated by language and social codes. They're never really quite what you want, your subjective desire, which inevitably limit and mediate our understanding of self and others. Like when you interact with another, Junchao, you're just using language, right? But language is just, clearly a simplification that presents an outline of possibilities, nothing more than that. But most people don't see language that way. They don't see words that way. Certainly men have a problem with this, right? Many men. I'm not one of these men, but some men, most men, I would say, take you at your word. Have you heard of that? I take you at your word. When you're speaking with a woman, you should be quite careful in your outlook toward her as it pertains to the words that come out of her mouth. When you talk to other men, you take them at their word. But when you're speaking with a woman, it's a different interaction. And if you don't understand that, you're going to have some problems in life. You'll suffer for quite a long period of time. Right? maybe forever. So that's the symbolic. How about the real, right? That's the domain of sex, Junchao. Remember, you see in the other what you lack, and it's not until you resolve the lack that you'll be ready for love. Within yourself, you have to resolve the lack. Don't think that you are going to find the cute one and you'll be whole again. Doesn't work that way. Ask yourself why you're with the girl you're with. You'll find your lack. Then ask yourself, why are you really with her? The real, of course, represents that which is beyond symbolization or language, ladies. The aspect of existence that resists being fully articulated or understood. It is the domain of what is radically other or outside, including trauma, for example, and profound experiences that disrupt our symbolic understanding of reality. The imaginary provides a false coherence, the symbolic structures our relationships and desires, and the real remains a persistent gap, a reminder of the limits of language and the impossibility of total understanding. So the real is the domain of sex, the real is the domain of trauma. It's the thing that drives you, actually, deep down, that you've never really put your finger on, fully expressed or articulated in language, right? Dare I say, that might be some of the content that forms intimacy between two forever different subjects. Fromm, I think, here is commenting on, again, it's a critical commentary on our culture, a culture that organizes love around feelings, right? The falling as opposed to the being. What we're doing with the Lacanian theory of love, gradually, is looking at what it takes to be in love. And as it turns out, it's quite a bit of effort. But it's worth it, I promise you. So we're going to start in a kind of a peculiar way. The following account, first recounted by Lacan in 1960, serves as a quintessential illustration of his insights on love. It's a very short little story. Very, very short. And when you first hear it, you might not understand much. But after some slides, we'll look back at it, and then we'll see what it looks like on the other side. Here it is. Ready for the story? Imagine you see in front of you, Emma, a beautiful flower or a ripe fruit, Erfan. You reach out your hand to grab it, but at the moment you do, the flower or the fruit bursts into flames. In its place, you see another hand appear, reaching back towards your own. Now, inside of this little story about fruits and flowers and flames, we have, if you like, the essence of love through the Lacanian psychoanalytic perspective. There's 4 themes that are derived from this little narrative, and you see it throughout his work. First, the suddenness, the unexpectedness of love, right? What's that Barbra Streisand song, Emma? Love comes from unexpected places. That's one aspect. Secondly, the connection between beauty and satisfaction. Third, in love, our reach always exceeds our grasp. Our reach always exceeds our grasp. And fourth, the question mark inevitable narcissistic dimension of love. Yes, it originates in an expression of narcissism, always. Don't be embarrassed about that. That's normal. But you got to graduate past that. That's the challenge. Let's look at each one of these domains. You remember the story, right? Reaching out, burst into flames, then there's a hand. The suddenness and unexpectedness. This is symbolized by the spontaneous burst into flames of the flower or fruit we reach out for. Love appears as a mysterious and transformative event arising seemingly out of nowhere. Remember, it was Badiou who talks about it as an event. It's an event in the sense that it goes beyond the laws of physics that you've known the universe to be organized around. It's something that just changes you and changes the world forever. That's the flame part. Second component, of course. Yes?
Sorry, I kind of want to just elaborate on the flame part a little bit more.
Sure, tell me about it.
Because it starts with the fruit or a flower. It's something beautiful and
Yeah.
soft and innocent. But then it bursts into flame.
Yes,
Like,
excellent question. Well, Žižek has an answer. He uses the word catastrophe. He calls love catastrophic. He calls love monstrous, because it is. Love is a catastrophe. You haven't realized this yet because you've only experienced amateur love. It's a pure catastrophe. Give me a little time. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It destroys you. There's no going back. Who you were before, gone. Forever. Can't bring that person back again. Love is a kind of death. We'll engage this soon. Don't you worry. The second component, the connection between beauty and satisfaction. Very, very mysterious connection, Junchao. Are you listening? The flower or fruit can be seen as representing the object of beauty, while the anticipated taste or scent signifies satisfaction. This distinction prefigures Lacan's differentiation between the object of desire and the object of the drive. Lots of layers. I'm doing my absolute best here, students, to give you a clear, tangible version of the theory. The third component, the idea that in love, our reach always exceeds our grasp. Just as the flame erupts upon reaching for the object, so too do our attempts to represent the beloved. Whether through words, images, or music, they all fall short of capturing the full experience of love itself. The fourth dimension, the narcissistic dimension of love, the origin of love, let's call it. Here, instead of grasping the flower or fruit, another hand appears, a reflection of our own. What? The story's poetic ambiguity invites multiple interpretations, and scholars diverge on Lacan's intention. Bruce Fink suggests that the other hand signifies the reciprocity of love. Up for debate. Yeah? You have to live some life, and then read it, think about it. Live some more life, read it, think about it. Live some more life, read it, think about it. Maybe it's the reciprocity, that other hand that reaches back. While Leader emphasizes the story's fundamental asymmetry, noting that one's hand is not reaching out to meet the other hand, but instead reaches for the object itself. You want to possess it, grasp it. Her, she's the flower, she's the fruit, Junchao. Should we talk about the theory? Let's look at it. The Lacanian psychoanalytic theory of love. Full disclosure, to speak of love, says Lacan, is to reduce it to a cliche. So to try to attempt to put this thing into words is a little bit ridiculous. You're never going to be able to capture the experience using language. I'm going to do my best. I'll do a pretty good job. Have a look and have a read for yourself. But remember, this is a simplification in the end. Right? So we begin with a quote. Love is giving something you don't have to someone who doesn't want it. Okay? We're going to go slowly here because you need to understand these things if you're going to ever graduate from amateur love to mature love. Love is giving something you don't have. You don't have to give it to someone who doesn't want it. What a paradox. Let's look at this strange gift of love. Giving what you don't have to someone. That's what love is in the beginning. For Lacan, to love is to offer up the hidden recesses of our being. True love is a gesture of unguarded vulnerability that demands the risk of total exposure. So when you give it, you are completely vulnerable. It's a risky business. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. To love is to be willing to give yourself not as you would like to be seen, but to give yourself as you are, Erfan, a being with inherent lack. To give yourself as the thing that you're not. That's how love begins. You know you're not the thing you want to be, right? There's lack inside of you. You give that. And you give it totally exposed. Thus, love is predicated on the willingness to let go of all curated images of self, all those things you do in the mirror. It's not about that. To receive love is to receive the other as she is, beyond all projections of her, beyond the ideal that she may hold for and of herself. So it's two people meeting, totally exposed as the thing that they know they don't have. That's the gift of love. You have to do some introspection to figure out your particular lack, but everyone's got it. Hey, if you look back at your romantic partners, you'll see a catalog of lack. If you see a pattern in it, there's probably a serious lack. But how can one give what one lacks? That's a weird idea, right? How are you supposed to give something that you don't actually possess? It's a lack that you're offering in love. Recall the unbridgeable gap in the mirror. It offers a coherent illusion, the thing in the mirror, Junchao, yeah? But it fails to capture the full complexity of our internal being. It's you, but it's not you, right? It doesn't capture how you feel. According to Lacanian psychoanalytic theory, there is no fixed or true self. We are constituted by the three orders, the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real, all of which structure our fragmented experiences of identity. Despite this inherent disparity, this lack, we choose to construct a phantasmagorical image, Erfan, of self, a fragile scaffolding of beliefs, values, principles that guide us through life and allow us to claim, I am Erfan, I believe in love, and I stand for a designated set of principles. This self-image that you've curated, this phantasmic framework allows us to navigate in and through life. But it's an illusion. The whole thing is an illusion that you've made for yourself in order to orient yourself and navigate the labyrinth of life. When you give love, you're not giving that illusion. You're giving yourself. So you have to put away the illusion to be engaged in love. If you've never done that, you'll never have a mature love experience. Never. It's impossible. What most relationships are is my phantasmagorical image with your phantasmagorical image, trying to complete the narcissistic puzzle. It's actually quite revolting. At a certain point, it makes you sick to your stomach. That's how I feel about it. When you see these beings with one another. According to Badiou, love is an event, recall that, which dismantles solitary experience and invites a revolutionary shared perspective on existence, a revolution that opens the door to a new experience of life, a new perspective on the world, seeing as two. For Žižek, love is inherently catastrophic because it shatters this carefully crafted self-image. So you have the event, it started, it's too late. That's the problem with it. Once it starts, there's no stopping it. Now comes the catastrophe. Everything you thought you were and tried to present yourself as, she sees through and shatters you. Now, it goes both ways. You shatter her as well. Now you've got a shot at it. You see how intimacy starts to become kind of interesting? And it's sort of about sex, but it's not about sex. So you shatter each other. That's love. It's a very, very peculiar thing. Once it occurs, it's an event. You see as two, but the you is gone. There's no more you. There's just her. And you, of course. And what's scary is that you can't be without her. You cannot. Who are you without her? You're no one without her. She's nothing without you. It's quite a terrifying and catastrophic, psychologically speaking, idea, because you eviscerate yourself in the event there's the flame. In a mature love relationship, right? To offer your lack, then, is to release the identity that once enabled you to navigate life. You have to let it go. That's how you give love. You let go of the nonsense, the ego, the bravado, whatever it is. In love, you risk the person you believe yourself to be, relinquishing the phantasmal framework you held onto for a bond that transcends self-image. So you're doing it to feel a bond with another human being. But to do it, to feel that bond, you have to die. And there's no coming back, okay? It's a one-way street. That's what's so catastrophic about it. True love dismantles, remakes, and leaves you exposed, asking you to relinquish certainty and embrace vulnerability in the face of the other. And the trick is, you have no idea what's going to happen next. Neither does she. Welcome to a mature love relationship. A more simple quote, hopefully: the only true answer to the enigma of the other is love, and acceptance of the other's radical difference. Love, in this sense, implies a symbolic death. To fall in love is to surrender your constructed self, to symbolically self-destruct in pursuit of a shared connection, the fruit. Love disassembles, love reconstitutes. It does both things. It shatters you, it destroys you, and it makes you at the same time. The inherent risk of love, the danger in it, is that it carries you beyond return into an unknown state of becoming where the outcome cannot be foreseen. So it's pretty scary. Part of the reason why this is new to you is because our culture is spiritually bankrupt. That's the reason why. And when I say our culture, I'm talking about a culture of capitalism that's built on transactions. OnlyFans, prostitutes, sex workers, escorts, right? Trophy wives. Do I need to continue down the line here? To approach love as a means of finding a savior, a healer, sometimes in the most sophisticated iterations of spiritual bankruptcy, you're looking for a savior. To use the parlance of the day, there's your red flag. Okay, if she wants to be saved, that's a problem. If she needs to be healed, you're her healer. That's a serious problem. Here's why. To approach love as a means of finding a savior or a healer is to misapprehend what love is about. It's not there to heal you and to save you. Love is not a path to self-rescue or repair. It wouldn't be love if it was. Ironically, the transformative power of love becomes apparent only after you have saved and healed yourself. You're going to start to feel the catastrophe in a second here. So, no one's going to save you, Irfan. No one's going to heal you. You have to do that. And if you can't do that for yourself, you will never experience, arguably, the most important experience of human existence: love. Here's the tricky part. Once you save yourself and you heal yourself, which you may never do, once you do, and the event happens, because it can only happen after you saved yourself and healed yourself, all that work that you did, gone. Gone. You're back to square one. That's the catastrophe of it. So you spend your life healing, saving, repairing. Okay, I can do it again. I'm building up that confidence again. You felt the disappointment, but it's okay. I'm back at it now. Then the event happens. Gone. No going back. Symbolic death. Including all that healing you did. That's why there's only one for Jacques Lacan. For me too. In this readiness for love, you face a paradox. Love requires the surrender of what once saved you, the relinquishing of what once healed you. You must abandon the self that self-healing formed and walk forward into the unknown, into unguarded vulnerability, prepared to lose the foundations that previously held you together and allowed you to be safe. It's a very, very dangerous game. And there's no guarantees of anything. Zero. And of course, we're also beyond the realm of language here. So it's something that's pulling you that we can, in a cliche way, describe as this catastrophe. Right? But you're inexplicably, mysteriously, spontaneously pulled. You can't help it. It's too late. If you've ever experienced it, there's no control. You had this amazing statement about self-control. That doesn't exist, mate. Like, if we're talking about sex, that's not difficult to achieve in terms of self-control. No problem. But if we're talking about love, forget it. Žižek says, have you seen interviews with Žižek? Do you understand what I'm talking about here? The guy can't sit still for like a second. Anyways, if you have reasons to love someone, you don't love them. It's not about reasons. You get it? It's not the story that you tell yourself or the little list that you make of pros and cons, right? The divorce attorneys like to talk about that kind of nonsense, right? It's not about a rational thing, Junshao. There's no reason in it. Now, this is for the rarefied air of people that aren't spiritually bankrupt, who are, intellectually engaged, who are trying to improve themselves and grow, who are producers instead of consumers, right? So it's not for everyone, but it's possible for anyone, I think, in the end, if you orient your life around it. What else are you going to orient your life around? Money. Well, I suppose you could do that too. The risk of love then lies not only in its demand for vulnerability, but also in its invitation to embrace the unpredictable. In surrendering to love, you accept that you may become unrecognizable, even to yourself. As love influence reshapes how you act, think, and feel in ways previously inconceivable. Žižek describes love as a form of madness, an event that disrupts the symbolic order of life and casts you into a realm where familiar rules no longer apply. And yet, it is precisely in this madness that the truth of love resides, a willingness to abandon safety and control in exchange for the chance to create an unexpected transformative bond. Žižek also has this lovely phrase, which I don't think I've included here. He says, philosophy in the end is like falling in love. That's what he calls it. It's a kind of madness. It takes over you. You can't help it at a certain point. Chemistry in the end is a little bit like falling in love, Junshao. If you're part of the aristocracy of the mind, of course. We're not talking about most people in the pharmaceutical sciences. How about from narcissism to subversive love? My favorite topic, subversive love. For Lacan, love originates in a form of narcissism because we initially see in the other what we think we are lacking in ourselves. That's almost always the start of things. Like, you may not realize that you're doing that, but that's what you're doing. What you find mysteriously attractive about them is the thing that you're missing. That's why you're attracted to them. So that's a narcissistic thing. You see it? See the narcissism problem? You have to move past that. Again, true love is not about looking for a savior. Rather, true love starts with the realization that the other is not lacking in the way that I lack. So you're not looking for her to save you, Irfan. You're seeing that you lack and she lacks, and maybe her lack is different than your lack, but you're both lacking. You're not saving. A very popular and sad thing that I see, and I've seen many of my friends do, is they get into a pattern with women where they look for someone. Like, I had one of my buddies say to me, what I look for is a girl who has a very specific problem that only I can fix. And I remember just, drinking a beer as I'm listening to this going, thinking about it on my own, of course. That's the worst expression of love possible. That's to be an amateur for the rest of your life. And most guys are like that, especially most good guys. You want to save her, don't you? You want to sweep in and buy her the right clothes and put her in the penthouse, Junchao, right? We talked about that last day. That's not love. That's amateur stuff. I want to back up here. In other words, we seek in them what we sense to be lacking in ourselves, but we recognize that my lack and her lack are different. And in a strange way for Lacan, when you identify a difference in the lack, a unique lack, let's say it's you and I, Emma, okay? I'm lacking. So are you. But it's a different type of thing that I'm lacking that you're lacking. And you see me for that, and you accept me for that, and I see you for that, and I accept you for that. In a weird way, of course, remember, we have to abandon everything that we had before. So that's gone. But we can't help it. Now we move forward, and ironically, the lack resolves itself. Resolves. It's a strong word. Let's look at it a bit more closely. We're mutually incomplete. We agree. When this mutual projection of completeness occurs, it creates the appearance that the two lovers resolve each other's lack. However, this resolution is not genuine completion, but rather a symbolic convergence that temporarily masks each individual's inherent emptiness. So we feel for a moment that we're struggling together, but in the end you're on your own, and so am I. Lacan suggests that love thus functions as a kind of shared illusion. We become crazy together, where each partner plays a part in supporting the other's idealized self-image. It's a new self-image based on the mutual incompleteness that starts to form. Otherwise, you can't exist in society. So it's a shared illusion, love. That's the supplement that comes in, Junchao, when sex is missing. By the way, when sex is missing, it's not like it's forever missing, hey? But at a certain point, it sort of drifts. It is an interlocking fantasy in which both partners invest, and though ultimately fragile, the shared sense of fulfillment enables them to confront the world with a renewed sense of unity and purpose, no longer based on a phantasmagorical image of self that you created from within your consciousness solely, but as a consequence of this intimate interaction with another phantasmagorical illusion, but one co-authored with someone that is totally vulnerable with you and you with her. Love demands something greater than any exchange, Junchao. It demands that one gives without expecting return. Very, very difficult business. If you've never experienced that, you've never experienced anything even remotely close to love. It has nothing to do with what you're getting out of it. Good luck finding one of those. Good luck. Both guys and girls, hey? Guys have expectations too. We're the dumber part of the species. There's no doubt about that. So our expectations are fairly transparent. But women have lots of expectations too. If you're coming into it with expectations of what you're going to get, that's not love. See how tricky it is, this love business? And how lonely the world starts to look once you realize what it's about? As per Badiou, true love is not about getting lost in each other. Oh, I'm lost in you. It's about looking out into the world as two. So I'm not gazing at you forever. We could do that for a while if you want. But the important part is to look out into the world together, right? Partners in life. Isn't that what we promised each other, Emma? In the gaze of one's beloved, there is a sense of profound belonging, a feeling of being precisely where one is meant to be. Only with her, just Emma and I. Okay? We belong together. You're at home with me. The rest of the world feels like a foreign planet to you. But when you're with me, oh, it works. Love requires that you give yourself completely to someone who is a complete stranger to you. That's the crazy part. I don't know who the hell you are. Who is this stranger in my bed, you might be wondering. And I'm giving my full self to you? Totally vulnerable? I don't know who this person is. To be clear, Lacan believes in a radical form of love. I'm building to my favorite part here, the climax. His view is that you love one person contra to everyone else. Shall I repeat it? You love one person contra to everyone else. There is no other person. This is it. She's the one. No more. Lacan was critical, of course, of how love becomes distorted within the framework of capitalism, where it often takes on a transactional, consumerist form. He's critical of this. Capitalism encourages individuals to approach relationships as commodities, valuing partners based on their perceived exchange value, right? How much is in your bank account? Don't the ladies want to know? Rather than as a unique, irreplaceable subject or set of subjects. In this system, love is reduced to a transaction, wherein individuals seek partners to fulfill specific desires or social ideals, trading affection, as it were, as a consumer good. So your love becomes another consumer good. I think that's the average experience of love. I was watching this film on Trump last evening, and I found it very interesting, the relationship that he had with Ivana Trump, right? The original Ivanka's mother. I mean, if you want to talk about transactional love, like there's no better example, in my opinion. If you're aware of that couple. Lacan's stance is that true love requires a singular commitment, a dedication to the beloved that defies commodification and rejects the consumer mindset. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to be it. Right? To love and to give without expectation of anything in return. If you have a younger sibling, you can understand this a little bit better. You know, it's about her. This is her world in the end. If you can help, great. But you don't want something in return. That's craziness. Think of your mother, Emma. I don't know her, haven't met her, but I assume mother's love, right? In most cases, I can't assume these things because I have no idea what your thing is. I don't know. I'll never know. But I know about my mother. So I can talk about her. I'm amazed constantly at her patience. It's unbelievable to me how patient this person is. Never expects anything in return. It's craziness. You know, in our culture, I'm really offended when I see this happen. I really believe in, sometimes they call it the duty of care. We spoke about this, Coral. Duty of care. She takes care of you, you take care of her. It starts with the family. Your family, your mom and dad, were it not for them, you'd be like nothing. You'd be no one, right? In this strange culture in America, at 18 years of age, the kid is out the door. Go figure it out on your own, kid. And it creates a weird sense of abandonment. It traumatizes the person. There's no question in my mind that that's the case. But usually the way they take it out in terms of revenge is they either abandon the mother and father relationship altogether. I don't know what they're doing. Or best case scenario, they'll pay money for a stranger to take care of mom and dad as they get older. And the more money you give, the more love you show. This is one of the most just offensive things for my moral sensibility and outlook on life that I've ever seen. And it's everywhere in North America. Don't get me wrong. There's instances in which maybe it's possible to have to be compelled to do that. There's weird circumstances that can create that situation. But there's no greater privilege than to be able to care for your parents as they get old and sick. That's coming. Are you ready for it? Right? For Lacan, love cannot thrive within a culture that encourages the relentless pursuit of self-interest and acquisition. I don't even know if we're capable of it in capitalism. I have serious doubts that it's even possible in this culture, to be honest, especially if a person has grown up in this culture. It demands instead an intimate, almost subversive commitment to the other as a unique and irreplaceable being. True love, in Lacan's view, exists in defiance of the capitalist tendency to quantify and consume, standing apart as an act of giving that resists the calculations of the marketplace. It's a subversive act to love somebody. But the interesting part, our friend, there's only one in the end that's worth it. Just one. You may never find her, which is okay. But if you do, there's only one. And it's not a soulmate. Only love makes it possible for jouissance. That's from my professor. For jouissance to condescend to desire. Only love makes it possible for jouissance to condescend to desire. So what is this word, jouissance? Well, there is no translation, as my professor Paul Moyart likes to remind everyone always. There is no translation. Some people say jouissance, it means happiness. No, it doesn't. Some say it means pleasure. No, it doesn't. Jouissance, it means a lot of things. So we just use the term, the French term, jouissance. Jouissance is the only thing made possible by love that can condescend to desire. The desire for sex, of course, we're referring to here. Is there anything beyond sex? Yes. It's called jouissance. And jouissance has a very specific formulation in men and has a very specific formulation in women. And it's a different thing. And ladies, you've got the advantage when it comes to this. Feminine jouissance, as you'll see in a moment, is an incredible thing. Truly. We don't have it. We don't have it. Should we look at this term? Let's look at it. Early in Lacan's teachings, jouissance was largely associated with the failure of language and the limitations of desire. So it occurs at the intersection of language failing to capture what's there and desire failing to absorb what's there, if that makes sense. As language structures our desires, it also restricts them, creating a barrier between us and an unmediated experience of pleasure. Thus, jouissance becomes what is sought when one strives to go beyond these linguistic constraints. It's the thing you can't put into words. It's the thing that desire can't quite ever envelop fully. Feminine jouissance. A primal fulfillment. Impossible to articulate, often destructive. Spies. So jouissance is not just resplendent. There's also a danger in it. This is not mere gratification. It's an overwhelming encounter with the real. An overwhelming encounter with the real. Lacan's term for that which is outside language, beyond symbolization, and resistant to integration into our conscious structured lives. So it's in this other plane that has access to the real in a way that's not the symbolic and not the imaginary. And feminine jouissance is a specific thing. Women have access to a fuller range of jouissance than men. Go back to our fixation of holding people at their word. That's the limitation. For most men, because we're so fixated on language as describing everything, that we deprive ourselves of feminine jouissance, which doesn't have that inhibition. Women have a sixth sense, don't they? They have, they're often much more musical than we are. Have you noticed that? Women have a spontaneous musicality about them. Or, I don't know, some women do. The good ones. That means that she's a delicate creature, capable of feminine jouissance. The question is, do you have the stuff to engage that inside of her? Or not? If you're porn addicted, not. Because it's not really quite the sex. It's the intimacy and the sex. But intimacy is such a cliche word. What does that mean? Reflecting a complex relationship with desire, pleasure, and the other. So it's in that neighborhood. Is it confusing? Yeah, it's really confusing. This is the clearest that you're going to hear it. Okay, try for yourself. We must talk about feminine jouissance, should we not? It's important. Lacan introduces the concept of feminine jouissance as a form of enjoyment that goes beyond what can be articulated or symbolized. This suggests that there are aspects of love and desire, particularly in feminine experience, that transcend language. Feminine jouissance is often linked to the other, the symbolic representation of language and culture, but is not confined to the other's definitions. It is an experience that cannot be fully communicated to or understood by another. So, when you feel it, ladies, you know it, but you can't convey it. They can do it. They have this power. We have a version of it, but it's not quite that. And they're much more versed in that domain than men are. Junchao was like, where's the formula? Show me the chemicals. This, you see the problem? This inaccessibility is a key feature of feminine jouissance, which exists in a realm that is intensely personal and internal, and it resists being shared or even fully understood by the individual experiencing it. It stands as a form of enjoyment that is irreducible and, in Lacan's view, reflects a unique relation to desire and the real. Unique to women, of course. A unique relation to desire and the real. Should we go back to this and have a second look? Imagine, Junchao, you see in front of you a beautiful flower, a ripe fruit. You reach out your hand to grab it, but at the moment you do, the flower or the fruit bursts into flames. In its place, you see another hand appear, reaching back towards your own. There's your essence of love, according to Jacques Lacan.